City. I'm not allowing many questions. Why don't we get...
Bob, I'm interested in finding out if there are any frequencies that have been identified that would produce a spiritual or mystical experience.
Yes, there definitely have been. A number of us have replicated the work a number of others have replicated the work I did in 1973. In 1969, I began building ethical biofeedback equipment, EEG brainwave amplifiers. And I had one foot on each banana peel. I had been a scientist. I'm now a kook. So we sort of straddle this chasm. So I have taught biofeedback at classes at UCLA, USC, Villanova, University of Hawaii, SMU. And when I was doing this for health professionals, I also had access to the psychic underground. In Hawaii, I was able to make brainwave recordings of one of the 3 living bloodline Polynesian kahunas, Morna Simeona. There's Sam Lono, Morna Simeona, and another fellow on the main island, and then there are all these thousands of pretenders, the Daddy Bray, Gordon. I'd rather not go into that. I was able to make brainwave EEG recordings of Hexenmeisters, like John Ott in Lancaster County, no relation to the fellow who did the work on light and color. I have worked with American Indian medicine men. I've worked Catherine Kuhlman, before she died, let me run a little telemetry test when she was knocking him down at the Shrine Auditorium. We found almost invariably that when they were in their working state, which was only a few seconds, you don't need it. You're here, you get the information, you come back, you can talk about it for hours. It's a flash in the twinkling of an eye. They were showing about a 7.83 hertz, almost pure coherent, maybe 20 microvolts signal frontal to occipital midline. That's between F1, F2 in the standard nomenclature system to halfway between O1, O2 if you're an encephalographer. In other words, the third eye to the inion, which shows whole brain alpha. And over again, we found these frequencies in people with remarkable talents: healers, radionics operators, dowsers, shamans, witch doctors, mystics, Golden Dawn, priests and priestesses, if they were authentic. One of our early cases was, well, I'd better not mention the person's name. It's a world-famous name. But at any rate, I was intrigued enough with this that if this were the common denominator, and yet none of these persons would speak to the others, Catherine Kuhlman thought it was the blood of the Lamb, that Christ has died for your sins, and that's the only way to go. And some of the American Indian medicine men thought it was in the sacred cornmeal, the gourds and the feathers, and Morna Simeona had certain stones that were the dwelling place of the ancestral spirits. Well, Catherine would think that was heathen, and Morna would absolutely laugh at a fellow in a barn in Lancaster County wearing a black hat between midnight and dawn, drawing these hexagonal figures, hexensiegels, to bless the barns. None of these people would speak to one another, but they were all showing the same signature. Now, the amazing thing about this is that 7.8 hertz is the mean median mode frequency of the Schumann resonance, or the Earth ionosphere cavity resonance, this little magnetic signal that's been dubbed the Earth's brainwave. So after we'd seen it enough times, I developed very sensitive magnetometers, which I sell to the government for anti-submarine warfare, that would detect this Earth ionosphere cavity resonance, and in a few cases, not enough to make a solid scientific case, but enough to be extremely interesting anecdotally, we found that there was phase lock, both frequency, amplitude, etc., between that person's EEG signature and the Earth's brainwave itself. Now, this was heresy when I reported on it in 1973 and then did a more formal paper in 77.
What does that mean to me?
It means that some people with remarkable talents, maybe 1 in 1,000, are sensitive enough to tune to this cosmic clock. When they synchronize their brainwave with this signal, they can access information in the hologram, which is normally not accessible except in an altered state of consciousness. If we take a hologram with helium neon laser light, which happens to be 632.8 nanometers, and try to play that hologram back with a carbon dioxide laser or anything else, we get garbage. That hologram, at least in the old-fashioned system, not the dichromates, must be played back at that specific wavelength of light. If it doesn't, you garble the image. The analogy here would be that if the holographic mind, which was very hot several years ago as a topic of conversation, is true, David Bohm, of course, this is his theory, and Carl Pribram thought it was a good idea and got on board. It is now fairly certain that the mind is a hologram. It acts holographically. If you cut a picture in half and throw half of it away, you've lost half the data. But if you cut half of your brain out, like we had a number of hydrocephalies that had a brain about the size of a grape, and we had veterans coming back from Korea, Vietnam, etc., World War I and II, that had 90% of their brain missing, they hadn't forgotten 90% of their family. They had remembered every single person. It wasn't as though you had thrown half of the information away. So that suggested that the brain was processing information like a hologram. If you break that hologram into smaller and smaller pieces, you still have the whole picture, but in less detail. But you can't see that picture unless you have that specific excitation frequency of, in the case of helium-neon, which is the most common, replays that information. So as a metaphor only, if the person has, by dint of meditation, religious practice, taking sacred mushrooms, or whatever the person does, managed to hit that particular frequency in his brainwave pattern, it seems to make him more amenable to all of this information. Now this is interesting because if our brain, our mind, is a hologram, and if you and you and you are existing right here, right now, you're part of it. Which means that if you can access what's in your mind, quantum physics says there's no reason why you can't access the whole thing. Thou art that. You are in the universe is in you, you are God. Whatever information is out there, you have just a little bitty slice of it. It isn't as sharp, it isn't as high a resolution as if you were everybody all at the same time, but you can do it, as any shaman or a person who's undergone any kind of mystical discipline, or the Monroe Institute, can demonstrate, in spite of all of the John Wheelers and Randy the Magician types to the contrary. So what that means to us is that maybe that magic number, 7.83 hertz, is the place on the alpha-theta border. Alpha is from 8 to about, they used to say 14. We now say 12.5 because there's a kappa in the gap. Theta is usually considered to be 4 to 7. So 8, or 7.83, is right there on that biphasic border between the alpha-theta. We've known for years that theta might be the area where we access creativity. You recall that Thomas Edison, Bernard Baruch, many people would take a little cat nap when they were dealing with a particularly knotty problem. They would say, I will have the answer when I wake up, and usually they would. Well, the reason for that didn't emerge till many, many years after the death of these people who had been using this technique. A number of us use it today. When it was demonstrated that when you go to sleep, the hypnagogic state going from waking to sleeping, the hypnopompic coming up from sleep to normal consciousness, you pass through that alpha-theta border. And that might be the place where you access the information external to your own nervous system. Now, you can get an argument on this, but great ideas down through history, from the invention of the calculus to inventions of many other things, have appeared simultaneously at places all over the planet. So that means that maybe Rupert Sheldrake is right, that there is a morphogenetic field, and that maybe this is the best way to access this. Now, getting back to your specific inquiry, this state can be stimulated with small magnetic oscillators. I brought this one. It was brought in from Germany. This is the Vitaset unit that many of the important people in Germany have to wear because it resynchronizes the left and right hemisphere firing with this little magnetic pace setter when they're feeling particularly distressed because they're closer to the Eastern Iron Curtain transmitters than we are. It's been found that these very small This has been done by Delgado, who had to leave the University of New Mexico and go to Spain because his work was so controversial. It's been done by Ross Adey at the Pettis VA Hospital out here in Loma Linda. It has been replicated by any number of people, both in the open literature and in the intelligence community, as a fact. Your brain can be stimulated to go into these particular states. And of course, Bob Monroe has another system which is highly viable, which I admire. Paul can tell you a lot about that. So instead of its being witchcraft, this is emerging as the medicine, the consciousness of the future. Instead of dropping acid to alter consciousness, there are far more benign ways. You had a question, buddy?
What are